Good morning. It's May 20th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. Yes, we got this Friday, the last day before the May long weekend, or Victoria Day, as some call it, for as long as we're going to be allowed to call it that, I guess. Looking into all of those who are joining us, a couple other observances today is International Clinical Trials Day. Yes, who'd have thought we'd have it, but we do. So if you see that person twitching and shaking going down the street, don't discard them as just another drunk. They could be trying some sort of new clinical treatment for something. So this is the day to recognize that. How we got by without such a day before, I'm not too sure. It's also Dog Rescue Day. That's a little more on the upside. That's something up my alley, of course. We foster dogs, Jane and I, and tend to adopt a number of them over the years as well. So actually, it's kind of prescient this year. There is quite a backlog of rescued dogs these days from a lot of people who got them during the pandemic and then found them inconvenient and dumped them into rescue rather than taking care of them later. Just another update, I guess, in a sense. Yesterday was a really good show. I had Danielle Smith on with her, I guess, her first day of her leadership campaign. I had Rachel Emmanuel, our own reporter, talk about Jason Kenney's retirement, and a recording of Jean Charest. Now, somewhere in all of that, apparently, we ticked off the YouTube gods, and that show got pulled off of YouTube. It's yanked off. They don't tell us why. They just tell us don't do it again, and it's pulled off. So I just like to remind everybody, I know most of our viewers, the comment scrolls easier through the Facebook video. That's where we see most of them. But the one where we're least likely to be canceled or censored is Rumble. So, search out westernstandardonline.com and look at our Rumble channel. It could be well worth joining to see there so you can catch all our episodes, because you never know when some of our stuff might have been pulled down or canceled or censored, unfortunately, and YouTube is just terrible for it. So you might want to check that spot out to get a more consistent product from my show and other shows. And again, unfortunately, Danielle's Smith's show won't be coming anymore because it would be a conflict. She's on the campaign trail, though I'm certain we'll be talking to her again as things move along. Okay, so let's see. I got some interesting guests today. Paige Sauter, I should say, and Shauna Pilipchuk. They're from the Alberta Disability Workers Association. And that's a group, of course, like their name kind of says it. They work with people with disabilities, a lot of home care workers, things like that. They haven't had a raise in something like 5 or 6 years. I guess their average wage is something around $17 or $18 an hour. And that's some pretty hard, difficult, and important work. And they're very shorthanded, which is leaving our most vulnerable even more vulnerable and uncared for. So they've been lobbying and petitioning to try and get that changed. So I'm going to talk to them about that. And we're going to have Franco Terrazzano pop on. We haven't seen him in a couple of weeks. And it's their gas tax honesty day or something of that sort. I should remember. We'll play a little clip to get that framed up properly. And of course, Franco will talk all things spending and taxes in general. So, we can look forward to that. It's a good, consistent chat with Franco. That's why we get him on all the time. He's always fun to have on and makes some very good points. So before we head into this weekend, let's have a look at what's got me worked up today. And this one really does have me ticked off. I've been listening to the coverage of the latest courtroom crap that they're putting Tamara Lich through in Alberta. And it's just nuts. The government's actions against the truckers convoy organizer Tamara Lich, they've morphed into an outright vendetta, and it's repugnant to watch. Crown prosecutor Moise Karimji sounded obsessive as he demanded Lich be tossed back into jail for the most flimsy of perceived bail violations. So the court exchanges between the prosecutor and Justice Kevin Phillips were fiery to listen to. The judge repeatedly had to admonish the prosecutor, saying he was surprised by this guy's name's something else, by the prosecutor's decorum, and asked him to contemplate that. And the prosecutor was furious, and he asked the justice to recuse himself from the case, stating he was considering a mistrial application due to the judge's comments. This is just a bail hearing, guys. So what high crime did Tamara Lich commit in order to bring about such an effort to revoke her bail? Well, Lich is receiving an award from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. It's called the George Jonas Freedom Award. She didn't demand the award or apply for it. It was granted to her by the JCCF. They give one out to people every year who they felt were worthy of recognition for their efforts to promote freedom. The alleged crime isn't that Lich is receiving the award, but she dared to respond to the email informing her of it, saying that she'd be honored to accept it. That's it. Nothing more. They're framing that as being apparently promoting the convoy. It's insane, and they want to throw her back in jail. Now, Lich has been free on bail since March 7th. She spent weeks in jail already, way too long, and the Crown fought her release on bail tooth and nail. They wanted her to remain incarcerated for months. Lich has had the ability, has abided diligently by her bail conditions for all of those months. She's not been traveling, she hasn't been talking to any of the press, and she hasn't been doing any social media. It's telling that the worst alleged violation the Crown could find to her bail conditions was an affirmative response to an award she was being offered. Lich didn't commit to traveling to accept the award, by the way, and she wasn't celebrating or posting about it in social media. All she did was accept it and say she was honored in an email. Due to this, the Crown's willing to tie up our court system and wants a harmless woman to languish in jail for an indeterminate period. Bail should only be denied if the person charged with a crime is deemed to be high risk to reoffend or flee. Now, Lich has been out for months. She's clearly not made any efforts to flee the country, and it's unlikely she's going to. She's got family here. She's got children here. She has a spotless criminal record as well. She's been a law-abiding citizen for decades. It's not as if she has a propensity for committing crimes. She isn't a chronic protester or activist. She simply started a fundraiser for a protest and got swept up in what turned out to be one of the biggest public protests in Canadian history. Aside from being involved in a registered federal political party, her record of public actions is actually pretty thin. Not that chronic protesting or activism are crimes anyway. As for reoffending, how or what could she do? It's not as if hundreds of semi-trucks and thousands of protesters are idling outside of Ottawa ready to seize Parliament Hill and erect bouncy castles again as soon as Lich gives the word. The protests are gone. It's done. There's no sign they're going to be returning anytime soon. If the government did decide to reinstate a bunch of pandemic restrictions, I expect the protests would return, but they would do so with or without Lich. She was really only one person among thousands. The crime Lich committed was to embarrass the government. The state vendetta against her today is based on nothing but spite and vindictiveness. Lich is a symbol of reason and activism that the government loathes. She isn't a crazed, screaming extremist with a criminal history. She's a mother who felt she needed to peacefully stand up against a government overreaching its authority. Her very existence puts lie to the absurd reactions of the government to the convoy protests, and they despise her for that. Lich is innocent until proven guilty, and she should be granted every possible freedom until if and when she is convicted of something. In 2019, it hit the news that 326 people in Toronto alone who had been charged with firearm offenses had been released on bail. In Alberta, I wrote on that just recently. It's a column on the Western Standard that there was 3 young mothers in the last year who have been killed by offenders who have been released despite having violent histories and convictions. Yet here we are spending all of this time and resources trying to lock up Tamara Lich. The motivation for the vendetta against Lich is political. It has nothing to do with public safety or law. In a year of national embarrassments, this is yet another one. The continued harassment of Lich from the Crown prosecutor is inspired, of course, by a petty, small prime minister who wants to quell any consideration of protests against his government in the future. It's exposing the corrupt and broken nature of Canada's politicized justice system. If Lich is locked up again, the time to protest will return, and this time it'll be outside the courthouses of Canada. We can't allow this gross persecution to continue or to succeed. All right, that's got me wound up today. So let's get on to Dave Naylor. He's wearing the symbol of Calgary these days, among a few other people in the office with that Flames jersey. How's it going over there, Dave?
It's going good, Cory. Yeah. My buddy at the Wink and Owl, Blaine, heard me complaining that I didn't have a jersey, so he gave me one of his. So I was quite gobsmacked. Very nice of him. But so I hear you're taking your second international trip of the year already.
I am. I'm going to try and be a super spreader. I'm heading for the hills as soon as this show's done, down to Sandpoint, Idaho.
Very beautiful country down there, Cory.
It is.
You'll enjoy it. So our website is very politically heavy this morning. Lots of stuff on Jason Kenney's so-called resignation. Well, as we all know, he says he's now going to stay on as leader until the party picks another leader. So he's going to be premier for the future. Anyways, our Mike Thomas has got a column up there on a fun column on how the left and the right in the province dance to different tunes. Kenney held his first cabinet meeting today since his shocking resignation announcement. Our Rob Ward went along and videotaped that. so you can see Kenny's entire remarks. And Amanda Brown, a reporter, was also there, and her story is up on what Kenny had to say about from his first meeting. And we've got Premier Scott Moe next door in Saskatchewan praising Kenny to the high heavens and saying we're going to miss him and we don't think he's done for good. Other stories we've got up, Cory, include our wacky environmental minister, Stephen Gilbeau, saying they're a bit behind on their plan to plant billions of trees because they really couldn't find any, believe it or not. I can just look outside our window and see a few. And federal employees down in Ottawa have racked up $20,000 worth of tickets in just illegally parking. So, now, if they can't even park right, we know they can't run the country right. So that's what we're doing. We're getting prepared for the long weekend, Cory. Going to be lots of stuff coming out Saturday through Monday. So I urge everybody to check back, even though it's a holiday, just to see what's going on. And our Linda Slobodian is writing about Tamara Lich as we speak. That'll be up shortly. And yeah, she's the same as you, Cory, just calls it vindictive action by the government, just trying to shut her up. So you have a great long weekend. Have a great trip. Hopefully you reach the United States before the Flames game tonight and the ridiculous starting hour of 8:30. And I want to hear some Go Flames Go chants from the United States from you.
Yeah, I'll be representing in northern Idaho, and hopefully I don't bowl you over as I do my sprint from the office on my way out the door for my 3-day escape there.
All right, buddy, you deserve it. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Dave. That was our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, always lots going on, guys, particularly on that provincial front. As we said, we sent Rob and Amanda down there to, we're just a few blocks away from the McDougall Centre, which is the Alberta provincial government building. So if there's going to be anything going on outside of the legislature and it's in Calgary, they do it there. And Kenny's back for yet another caucus meeting. Yesterday's strange caucus meeting, got delayed. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's first, I want to remind everybody, this is how we can get those reporters out there. This is how we can cover this news, and how we do these things is thanks to subscribers, guys. As you can see on the screen, we got a lot of good deals up there for it. For less than $10 a month, when you take advantage of the incentives using the coupon code TRIGGERED, take it out for a year at a time, well under $10 a month for full, unfettered access to the Western Standard, to all of our columns, all of our newsprint as it breaks, things like that. And that's how we can stay independent. I mean, you look at all the garbage on the federal government news. I'll call it federal government news. I mean, they're reliant on subsidies. They're reliant on bailouts. So once you're dependent, you're afraid to shake rock the boat, shake the tree. So our mainstream outlets basically parrot the government line. We saw that. We're seeing that with the coverage of Lich. What coverage of Lich? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Nobody's talking about this. This is a woman in court being put through the ringer on a bail hearing. It's ridiculous. But we're not hearing anything from the mainstream, are we? No, because they don't want to tick off Trudeau and perhaps lose their money. Well, we don't take that money. We rely on you guys. So yeah, if we tick enough subscribers off, well, I guess we'll have to reevaluate our plan. So far, obviously, a lot of you guys like our coverage. You're staying on, and it's been great. And if you haven't already, take out a subscription, guys. That's how we can keep doing these things. So yeah, as we said, we sent it. It was pretty chilly out there. Amanda and Rob went down with a camera to try and catch the conference. They didn't really say too much of note. Unfortunately, we thought maybe a couple nights ago that this chapter of Jason Kenney's time was kind of over. I mean, I understand it takes more than a few hours for things to turn over and change. But we thought, okay, a few days we'll have an interim leader and then move on to a leadership race. But no, it sounds like Premier Kenney is going to stay on as premier until a new leader is selected. Now, this has happened before. Not every time does a party get rid of the leader. Often leaders have sat as interim leaders themselves until they're replaced. Not usually when they've been kicked out by their own members like that, but everything's been weird and unprecedented. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. My jury's out as far as I'm concerned on whether that's a good idea for the transition or not. Their meeting yesterday with caucus was only supposed to be 2 hours. It took something like 6. So they were fighting like cats and dogs as usual. Some of the things, I guess, that would be a consequence of Kenney remaining as premier until the end of the leadership race, which could be 5 or 6 months away, is that the members of caucus that he ejected previous probably won't be brought back in. Now we can't assume that they would be had Premier Kenney stepped aside as well, but we just don't know. So the transition and the change is going to take a little while. I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse. And as I said, it's not unprecedented for a leader to stay on until a new person is selected. But in this case, I mean, to be honest, I just would have thought that Kenney would just say, "Oh, I've had it with this anyways. I'm exhausted. I failed. Let me just get out the door and retire, or at least work on think what I want to do with my political future." So strange days, but we're covering it. As I said, we sent our reporters down there to the McDougall Center today and didn't really see much of interest. Didn't learn a lot, unfortunately. It was one of those types of conferences. Kenney wouldn't take any questions, and they shuffled back in that cold wind. And, well, we're reporting what we can. And the stories will be up there, as I said, on the Western Standard Online.com. Actually, it's westernstandard.news now. We expanded our website. I'm kind of rambling there. So I see, actually, I've got my guests in the lobby. I won't hold them there too long. I want to speak to one of our sponsors before we pull them in here, because I am really interested in talking to these guys. So let's talk about, and the other reasons we can stay on the air, guys, and that's our sponsors, one of which is Bitcoin. Well, if you're looking at getting into digital currencies, guys, you're curious about it, you're considering it, these are the guys to check out. This is the way to look into it, see if it's for you. It might not be, it might be. The thing is, what you've got, though, is a solid Canadian company that will sit down and have a one-on-one in-person consultation with you, show you how you can get involved in digital currencies, how you set up your wallet, how you set up your ledger. They've got ATMs across Canada. They can set things up so you can have automatic deposits into your Bitcoin account or pay your bills just like with any other bank account or things like that. They make digital currency make sense to you. They make it practical and it's safe, of course. That's the really important thing. You work hard for your money. Inflation's bad enough. If you're going to take your money and invest it in something, you want to make sure it goes where it belongs. So Bitcoin, well, those are the guys that will help you along with that and show you how to take control of your money. So check them out, guys. They've been a great sponsor. Oh, and I see Nico's brought them in, and that's great. Okay, so we've got our two guests. I've been looking forward to talking to them. I hope I can get these pronunciations right. They don't look that bad for me. I get some complicated ones, and I mess them up all the time. So we've got Paige, McCann, Sauter, and Shauna Pilipchuk. And they're from the Alberta Disabilities Workers Association. So thank you very much for coming on to talk to us today, guys.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting us.
So maybe just to begin with, like your association, I saw your release, and we'll go into more of the issues, but kind of describing what your association is about. It's not a union, but it's still an association of people representing a sector. And the workers within the disability services aren't government employees. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So the workforce that provides services to Albertans with disabilities is a community service. So they're not employed by the government. The services are provided by nonprofit and service organizations as the workers' employers.
Okay, so a disability worker, that would be for like what would be examples of somebody who does that, like a caretaker, I guess you could say, for an individual or assisted living?
Yeah, that's a great question, because oftentimes what happens is that there's a misunderstanding of who it is that does the work, and we oftentimes are confused with those that work in long-term care centers, extended care centers, or provide personal care attendance. What our workforce is providing services out to Albertans with developmental disabilities, and individuals live in Alberta communities where they are living in their own home. They may be sharing a home with other roommates. They're living and working across Alberta, and the workers are there providing services to help them live the life that they want to live and help them live the life as an Albertan and a citizen.
Great. So maybe onto your initiative then. The problem is, that the pay, unfortunately, to be blunt, from what I've seen, kind of stinks for such an important and challenging job, and it hasn't had a raise in quite some time now. What's going on? I mean, I guess that's a challenge, though, when it's not, I guess, one solid unit. It's not government employees. It's not a union. So how do you address having the wages? I mean, they should rise. They have to. The cost of everything is going up, and this is a tough, important job. So how do we get that raised up? Like, who are you petitioning to exactly, I guess we could say?
So we're calling on the Alberta government because organizations and families who employ staff to provide the services, they receive funding from the government in order to hire staff. We have not had a funding increase for wages and compensation since 2014. So an already underpaid workforce, undervalued workforce has fallen drastically behind what they should be being paid for this important work. And we are having attraction and retention issues to the point where people coming up into the system for services, organizations are not able to take new services on because we can't find staff to do the services we're doing already. It's a competitive market and we need to be able to pay people adequately.
Well, that's it. And the cost of living is rising. So, but I mean, so this works through, it's kind of indirectly government funded though. So it'll come from the government to a number of different organizations. And then how does that work towards, I guess somebody is hired in a circumstance, it could be at a group home or it could be a family member hiring an individual how does the hiring spectrum work with that?
The workforce is very diverse in the skill sets and the types of work they're doing. So you can have employment specialists, you can have community support workers, you have people in their homes providing all the care that somebody and support that somebody would need inside their home. And so in our workforce, we have about 15,000 workers across the province who are hired by a variety of organizations and families to provide this support. And each organization or family has its own government funding to do that. So when there's no funding increase, you either have to cut back services to give increased compensation, or you cannot increase compensation. So our last resort is always to cut back service. This is absolutely required service in our communities for these people. And so we are calling on the Alberta government that these funding contracts have to be increased to directly relate to compensation for staff to do this important work.
Right. And so when you think about the cost of living over the last 8 years, so it's not even just what is currently happening now. There's not been an increase in that funding. So with the cost of living increases, service providers have other expenses, right? Insurance, maintenance, facilities, food, all those kinds of things are increasing, but their contract funding is not increasing. And so in order to just stay open, they have to start, moving those funds from what would be called direct service money just to, pay insurance, pay rent, those kinds of things.
Okay, so this, which government ministry, I guess, would be responsible for this? Would this be social services or health, or where does you say it's an annual budgetary sort of item, right?
Right, so it's in the Ministry of Community and Social Services. And these services are called persons with developmental disabilities or family supports for children with disabilities. Those are the areas where the funding is going.
Okay, and then with disabilities, of course, that's a broad term and a number of people suffer from a great many of them, but predominantly what you're speaking of are individuals with developmental disabilities, I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah. So onset of that disability was before they were 18, and it's a very significant disability to the point where somebody needs support in their life in order to do the things, they wish to do.
Yeah, and that support looks very different for each individual person, right? So it could be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type of support to a visit once a week to see how things are going.
So with these workers also, I mean, as you said, there are different circumstances. Does this also apply to, say, larger facilities like a Missioner Center? I know they've been winding down. I don't even know if they still house people any longer, but are facilities like that as well under this umbrella? Or
well, that, interestingly enough, there's a couple of direct services, and so those are direct employees of the government. So people who work at Michener Center, people who work at residential support services, those are government direct services. And so they are unionized employees. So when we go back to 2014, when there was the last increase, that increase was really advocacy just to bring the community service workers to the level of the people who work for government that provide who do the same work. So they were just trying to bring us to level. And we didn't even actually get to that point and they still owed us percentages, but that was the commitment. So since then, we've fallen even more behind that comparison type of work that is truly a government employee.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify everything, as we move our way down. Like I said, we're something of a conservative media outlet and a show, but the reality, even with conservatives, we believe that people who can't care for themselves without some help, that's our social obligation to help take care of each other. That's what we do. I mean, this is an area I think few people question, spending some tax dollars and ensuring we're taking care of our neighbors and our friends. And it's just one of those areas of the worst areas to be cutting back in my view. So I just wanted to clarify what that's all about.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that as an association that we really emphasize, and it's putting the humanness in it. So, regardless of the government of the day or regardless of political views, we're talking about people and Albertans and citizens who require support to live the lives that they want to live. And that support needs to be provided by an individual who has certain skill sets, because one of the main focuses is to individualize that support. And that requires a lot of skill sets. And, with the erosion of the workforce over, the last couple of decades and the cuts that were happening into human services, it's gotten to the point that people are not choosing this as a career because the wages are so low. We lost post-secondary educational programs because people were not going to school in order to become a community services disability worker because the wages were not there once they graduated. So it's a long-term kind of thing. We cycle in and out of crisis. But where we're at now is critical, and we need some short-term, immediate responses from the government in order to just keep people who are working now to stay working. And that's really the crisis that we're in.
Yeah. So with that, and it would be difficult to make it happen fast, but you still have to start somewhere. So what would happen is they would release the funds that would go, presumably, if they wanted to increase it, it would go to a number of organizations, and that could funnel down through wage increases. What assurances would the government have, though, that the organizations would, move it down into wage increases? Like, would it be targeted spending?
And there's history of government doing this in the past. There's mechanisms where that funding can be provided and released and accounted for. Organizations and families who hire privately are highly accountable for the funding that they get. And so there are ways to do that. We've done it in the past with previous governments back before 2014. And so we're confident that the money would go directly to where the problem lies and to the immediate need that we all have.
Great. I mean, our government is, as I said, I'm conservative. I don't like seeing them spend blindly, but this is an area I feel, especially if they've been sitting on it for this many years. Hey, the budget's looking pretty good. We've got some good energy resources coming in. We've got a need. This would be a good time to top up on something like this, where we're helping our citizens and our people on the ground. I mean, God knows we waste money on enough other things. This is an important one they could certainly dedicate towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too, so we have two asks to our campaign. We have that immediate intervention to help us kind of get through this crisis. And then we have a long-term ask about the idea of having sustainable and predictable funding increases that go along with the cost of living, so that we don't see ourselves repeated crisis over and over and over again. So we don't want to see this kind of one-time influx of here's a bonus, right? We want to see an increase, and then we want to see a plan that allows people to have sustainable, predictable funding increases that allows them to increase the wages as we go forward.
So going further to that, I mean, aside from, just funding, which is, of course, it's essential to everything, are there just other systemic changes or ways that things are being done that could be changed as well to improve the process? It sounds like it's a bit of a convoluted path from taxpayer to person who's receiving the services.
Absolutely. We always talk about there's a whole bunch of balls that have to be in the air at the same time, right? Because it is very complex. So one of the things that we recognize in order to have it sustainable for people to choose this as a career is the idea of competency and certification. So at ADWA, we've also been working on a certification model that looks at a certain skill set. And with that skill set comes a professional wage, comes a professional expectations and professional responsibilities. And that was one of the reasons why ADWA started in 2010, was to be a voice for that workforce and to try to see what has been eroded since the 80s to come back to where it needed to be. And so we want to see a level of skilled workers who choose this as a career and are committed and stay in it. And that the post-secondary institutions are able to have those programs available to them to provide the skill set and the workforce that's needed for Albertans.
Well, I would imagine reducing turnover is very important in this too. Like, workers who develop relationships quite often with the people they're caring for, working with, and it's not good for some people with developmental disabilities to have a number of changes and changing faces and things like that with their individual needs. So again, I mean, if there's better compensation, you're going to reduce the chances of people constantly changing jobs.
Right, absolutely. And relationships are key, right? Relationships are one of the reasons why people who are currently working in the sector don't want to leave, right? So they are struggling. The stories that we hear on a daily basis are the struggle and the dilemma that they're facing, that they're passionate about what they do, they're committed to what they're doing, they're committed to the people that they work with, and yet they find they can't afford to stay. And if they can't afford to stay, they're making a choice now to leave. And that's the crisis. And then when they leave, we don't have somebody else with that skill set to come in. There isn't that recruitment to replace the person who chooses to leave. So that's that emptiness. And that puts people with disabilities with fewer staff that are available to provide the services, as well as the unpredictability of who's going to be working, who's going to be with me tonight in the evening, who's going to be with me tomorrow morning, right? So that inconsistency of the staffing for individuals is really, it really isn't fair to them.
Yeah, and it's a competitive work market. I mean, if a person has to choose between paying the rent and keeping the job they like, well, they still might have to just take that other job that pays better and move on. And again, it's putting a very vulnerable sector even more vulnerable. So that's why I wanted to have you guys on to speak to it, because it's kind of sliding under the radar. You don't have you're not a union, so you don't have that strength in quite the making noise or lobbying government so directly, and we just don't want people to forget about that. So with your initiatives out there, you've got a petition and some other things. How can people support your efforts?
Our website is adwa.ca, and we have, there it is in the button, the essential but forgotten. So one of the things, like you said, because we're not a union and we're a professional association, our role is really about advocating for the workforce for people who do this work across Alberta. But we also feel very strongly about empowering our membership and the people who do this work to advocate for themselves. And so what we're seeing is support from families. We have support from self-advocates. We have support from members all across Alberta who are writing letters, having meetings with their MLAs, who are doing everything that they can in order to get this message heard. And, being on a show like this, we appreciate it, because you're right, having the misunderstanding of who it is and what this workforce is something that that is a challenge for us. And but I mean, a lot of people are talking about it, and that's a great thing.
Great. Well, Paige and Shauna, I appreciate you coming on to talk to us today about it and the work you do. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
No, I just think go to our website, and we provided different examples. We give sample letters of how you can connect with your MLA, and we're going to continue doing that and posting. We have a lot of stories, and just kind of remembering who it is that we're talking about. We're talking about people, Albertans with disabilities who require support, and we're talking about the people who are employed by community-based organizations that are providing that service. So it's really about people and not about the money and the statistics.
Great. Well, thank you again, and I hope somebody starts paying attention out there, and we can resolve this before there's any more damage done. So, again, thank you for coming on today, guys, and perhaps we'll talk again in the future on a more positive note.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So, as I said, that's the Alberta Disability Workers Association, and as we said, it's different than some of the other things. I noticed in some of the comment scroll, people saying, "Are they a union?" No, they're not a union. Are they part of AHS? No, it's not part of AHS. And these are things I had to learn as well. Like perhaps that's why I asked about systemic reform, though I understand they can only talk so much to that, but it could be a bit convoluted if you got a number of organizations getting those services down to the individuals. But it's hard to have a centralized organization that can do things correctly as well. Because there's different types and levels of care, different individuals, as they were saying to us. Some need 24/7 semi-medical sort of care and facilities. Other people might just need a few hours a day of some help. Some might be just a little bit of family support. So you could have different organizations that are supporting the different people. It's different training. And as some others are pointing out who have encountered the work that these people are doing, is that they are getting paid terribly. We're looking at about $18 an hour. And in Alberta today, that is not a heck of a lot of money. That's not a lot of money for a job that is that difficult and that important. I've said it before and I said it again. The term for it is compassionate conservatism, right? I'm a libertarian-leaning person, but I'm not. I'm a classical liberal. I'm not a hardcore anarchist. Just let society go to the wolves. I strongly believe in taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. As opposed to those who won't take care of themselves. And it can be difficult to distinguish. But when it comes to a lot of citizens with developmental disabilities, it's not that difficult to determine. These are people that need some help. They need help taking care of themselves. Their families need help taking care of them. This is how we prevent people from ending up in institutions or in healthcare facilities or being harmed or homeless or on the streets if they have disabilities. And, we can keep them around family longer and have them in more stable environment longer and living better longer. But look at the work. I'm sure everybody's encountered disability workers. You've seen them. They're trying to keep a number of challenged people safely occupied and entertained and productive. They're taking them out for field trips. Or I've noticed even in Superstore, I've watched groups taking groups out shopping. But sometimes an individual will have, for lack of a better term, a meltdown. Well, it takes an incredible patience to be able to calm the challenged person down and get them stabilized again and carry on with the day. Like, this is not minimum wage sort of work. It really shouldn't be. And as I said, I can only guess that you really have to get to know the individuals you're caring for so you know how to respond to them. So this isn't a job you're going to do well if you're new to it all the time or if you've got turnover. As somebody's responding to Al Rourke, yeah, it's contracted services and they're on all sorts of levels. I know there was some questions about the vaccination. I'm not going to go into it because it's a number of different organizations. It's not like AHS. And that's sort of a side issue with it. It's an important issue, but it's a side one. So at this point, though, again, we've got a lot of people in need. Try to put yourself in the shoes of the families who have, a family member who has serious disabilities. How much resources, how much time can you put in? You still want to work. You still want to have a bit of a life. You want your family member with the challenges to be as well guided and cared for as possible. And you can't get workers. You can't get necessarily properly trained workers. You can't maintain them, especially right now when they haven't had a raise in 7 years. And right now, the cost of living, everything is going through the roof. So I'm glad these guys are speaking up. And as I said, as for the confusion, they're not a union. And I don't want to see a union. As we know on this show, I'm not a big fan of unions by any stretch. They're an association, and they're speaking up for that group in that area. And I'm glad they are. And they got a bigger challenge in speaking up for it as a non-union organization than others would. So check them out, guys, because I think it's one of those areas where the government shouldn't be. Hey, we're always going to watch our dollars. We want to make sure they go where they belong. But this is an area that we can most definitely increase some funding, guys. We've got the budgetary room. Lord knows I point out waste and bad spending all the time on things the government's doing. And I'll point out a few more today as we go through some news items. And I have Franco from the Taxpayer Federation on. But this is an area where they need our help. They need our money. And because we're taking care of each other's, guys, we're not that heartless. I'm a scowling, crabby old conservative, but I know which people need to be cared for and which don't. and the people with disabilities are people that do. So let's see, before I move on, Franco will be on in a little bit. Let's talk, I'm going to get my other sponsor out of the way. Speaking of individual rights, speaking of associations, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Same sort of thing. See, that's not the Canadian Shooting Sports Union. It's an association. It's an organization of like-minded people with something they have in common that they want to support, and that is shooting sports. All sorts of resources, guys. They got things, videos on how to safely operate firearms, different things you can do with them. Target shooting, trap shooting, black powder shooting, all those different things for those hobbies. A lot of people really love it. Links to trade shows, links to regulations, so you know how to legally stay within the right bounds. I mean, we're law-abiding firearm owners. We're not out hurting anybody. And also, like the other association, they're advocating for their members. And in this case, it's a matter of advocating for firearm owners, because we have a government that brought back the registry through a back door, that recategorized hunting rifles as assault-style weapons and banned them. Well, we got to stand up for ourselves. If you want to maintain your property, if you want to keep enjoying that great sports of firearms or collecting them or whatever you want to do, you got to stand up for yourself. And that's what the Canadian Shooting Sports Association is all about. Get onto their site, check them out, take out a membership. It's not that much, and it's well worth it. It's an investment in your own rights. CSSA-CILA.org. It's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Okay, so let's see here. Speaking of crazy left, this is a story that came up. Yeah, we got a new Democrat lawyer who endorsed decriminalizing heroin, was appointed a judge by the federal cabinet. So Susan Fraser of Toronto is now an Ontario Superior Court judge. There's some discussion about decriminalizing on drugs and some things like that. So, I mean, this story I don't see as such a being beyond the pale. But if you look deeper into this person who was appointed, like, holy cow, we're talking crazed, hard left individual. We're not talking center left or a little red. This gal she's living in a weird blended relationship. And I'm not talking about sexual orientation. I'm talking about one of those open things where we'll all just kind of that free for all. And that's her business. They're consenting adults. But this is the world of the wacky far out left really getting out there. And we do have to worry to some degree about the crossing that line between enabling addiction and saving lives. And having somebody who's that strong an advocate on some things and then putting him on the bench, I don't know if that's going to be a good idea, but it's too late. This is more that indication of what's going on now that we've got that unholy alliance between Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. You know, the Liberal NDP line is very, very blurry at this point. So this new justice was part of, here's another example, a counsel for the Coalition for Gun Control. So she's anti-firearm. She wants to bring in more laws like this. So, I mean, when you want to bring in a justice, I understand it's politicized. That's the way it goes. You would hope, and I know the right and the left are both guilty of it, but still, you would hope they try to find somewhat centrist thinking people, somewhat ones that will actually be a judge, you know, holding those scales and being blind like the statue down in the States and just looking at the facts. But when they have such an activist history like this one, you're not going to get a balanced judge at all. She was, the counsel for the Coalition for Gun Control. She contributed almost $2,000 to the NDP. You know, so yeah, she's not just, NDP leaning. She's a heavy NDP supporter. Again, that's nothing new with judges who are getting in. Though a Liberal government just appointed an NDP judge. Think about that, you know. The NDP never really federally ever had the power to appoint judges before, but they've got that very, I'm going to stay away from the tastelessness before the weekend, but Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh have a very tight relationship. And it's showing in some of the actions of this government now. So I can't wait to see some of the rulings that will come out of the Ontario Superior Court from this new hard left judge that they've put in there. And we're going to have some problems. And now, speaking of government waste, so here's what we're talking about. We got people with this association of disability workers in Alberta that are making about $18 an hour, you know, when the cost of everything's going through the roof. Well, senators yesterday were considering billing taxpayers for $175 an hour counseling service for witnesses who testify at committee hearings. Yeah, so This is what the government's doing with our money. We can't afford to take care of our citizens with disabilities correctly, but we can spend $175 an hour to counsel people because they had to be a witness at a committee hearing. Because what? Their feelings might have been hurt. They might have been questioned on something. Oh, don't call snowflakes to your committees anymore. But either way, $175 an hour. And I know counseling's expensive. But what obligation do we have? And how bad are these hearings? I wish these hearings were so volatile and lively that they would actually put people into a place where they need therapy almost. But this is where the money's going, right? Again, we can't afford to protect our most vulnerable. But you know, these ones who are asking for the counseling, you know, the snowflakes who are whining for it, we don't have to wonder about that. It's whenever you call up a senior civil servant. It's whenever you call up one of those clowns and call them to account in front of a committee for how they pissed away our money or what they did, what their actions were. And then they got to cry their tears and we got to pay $175 an hour so they can lay on a couch and whine at somebody else about it. That's our money at work. Good work. So, yes, the House Speaker confirmed it's paid nurse counselors, they're called, for witnesses, and based on an as-needed rate. You know, like millions and millions of dollars, guys. So, yeah, sharing someone's lived experience, when that experience is traumatic, you know, is tough. Yeah, fine. You testify in front of a committee, it's harsh on you. Guess what? Let's talk about some of those things. You know, they talk about when people come before their committees in their ivory tower. We're getting back to justice services, courthouses. Well, there's people who testimony, victims who have to go in and face the perpetrators. They deal with traumatic circumstances. They deal with being victimized by a crime and then having to see the scumbags who committed the crime when they go to court, and then perhaps have to see them over and over again when they keep applying for parole. They're not getting $175 an hour for counseling services. No, because they aren't in the House of Commons around a bunch of useless senators at one of their committees. They're just busy fighting for their own lives in our justice system. Or as Wendy's saying, yeah, supporting veterans with PTSD, people who encountered very serious, you know, terrible incidents while they're in service overseas or domestically even. They need help. They need counseling. But no, we're spending $175 an hour for people because, oh no, I had to testify at a committee. Oh, you poor bugger. Save your own nickels and do it yourself. But well, that's your tax dollars at work. So yeah, I can get upset. And you know, and you see, we can walk and chew gum. We can talk about where there's gross waste of money being poured out in one area, and another area where most of us, I think, agree, such as paying for people to take care of our fellow citizens who have disabilities. The government won't open their wallet for that. We've really got our priorities in a terrible place. Whereas Dave was pointing out, yeah, we got government drivers. You know, this was a neat one out of Ottawa. You know, federal employees ran up nearly 20,000 in parking and traffic violations. So, I mean, people say, oh, the federal government, that's next to nothing. Well, it is, but it's the principle, right? What's that old saying? Take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. Like, if you could piss away 20,000 without thinking about it, you can piss away millions without thinking about it. If you can piss away millions without thinking about it, you can piss away billions without thinking about it. So every dollar has to be accounted for. Everything has to be taken seriously. These are people, whoever these individuals were who ran up those tickets, were completely indifferent to your dollars because they're expensing their traffic violations. Where can you do that? I mean, we don't have a Western Standard vehicle or anything, but I could tell you if we had, say, a wrapped Western Standard car and I went out and parked it somewhere stupid and it got towed, I'll tell you the chances that Derek is going to give me the money to pay the ticket for it. Yeah, nor should he. You know, I mean, I know how to avoid getting speeding tickets and you know, traffic tickets. And if I get them, they do have occasionally happen. Guess what? It's my own fault. But if you're a federal civil servant, well, it's somebody else's problem, I guess. Let's see. Canada Post in a 2019 Access to Information filing said it paid almost $7.5 million in tickets over a $10 period. Look at that. So yeah, you know, I had to scroll down farther, I guess, to see the real story. So that was just 20,000 in a couple of different departments. But Canada Post, boy, these guys have really broken the record here. I guess, you know, you don't want a postal worker to park somewhere where you'd have to walk more than a block to get to his route. So I guess they've been running up those tickets. They operate a 13,000 vehicle fleet, 7.5 million tickets. You know, I drove company trucks when I was in the oil field. And yeah, if you got a radar ticket or something like that, guess what? It would come to me. The boss wasn't going to cover it for me, but hey, look at that. Canada Post, We'll foot the bill, $7.5 million over 10 years. So about $750,000 a year. But again, I despise when people dismiss expenses and costs like that. It's not their money. $750,000 a year is a lot of money. It's a lot of money to me. It takes me a good few years to make that sort of money up. So no, don't say that's minor. Don't dismiss it. And that's where we get to talking about, government doesn't need more money. They don't need to take more taxes. They just need to spend it better. Spend it where it belongs. So stop paying posties speeding tickets. Stop giving counseling to a bunch of pussies from the civil servants because they had to give a testimony at a Senate committee meeting, and give the money to people who are actually working on the ground, doing important things for people who can't do them for themselves. That's what we got to do with things. So I'm going to talk to somebody who likes getting pissed off about waste of tax money himself as well, and that's Franco Terrazzano. He's going to be on soon, and I'm going to line up with a clip from a video, actually, from their initiative on the honesty in gas taxes and such. And that'll set the stage for gas tax discussion with Franco, and we'll go on from there. So let's run that video, Nico, and then we'll bring Franco on for a chat there.
Hey everyone, it's the Canadian Taxpayer Federation's 24th Annual Gas Tax Honesty Day, where we shine a light on all the hidden taxes that you pay every time you fuel up. Over my shoulder, you can see gas prices in Ottawa is over $2 per liter. And here in Canada, taxes can make up to 38% of the pump price, which means that on a 64-liter fuel up, you could be paying more than $35 just in taxes. But here's where the pain is really coming. By 2030, because of the Trudeau government's announced carbon tax hikes, the total tax bill at the pumps could reach 96 cents per liter of gasoline. So you know what? It is extremely tone deaf for the Trudeau government to continue raising the carbon tax when Canadians are already struggling to afford to fuel up their cars with gasoline on the way to work. We need tax relief, and we need tax relief right now.
Great. So I've already messed up Franco's messaging, and Derek corrected me on that earlier, and I didn't pass it to Nico, so it's not his fault. It says Gas Tax Freedom Day, but we could use a Gas Tax Freedom Day anyway, so maybe that'll be your next one. But it was Gas Tax Honesty Day, and that was my fault for not passing the correction down. But all the same, they're good messages. It looks like that was a pretty soggy Taxpayers Federation guy standing out there ranting, Franco, but I appreciate the work. So what's that all about? Expand a little further on your latest initiative there.
Yeah, well, thanks, Cory. I mean, it's a part of our 24th annual Gas Tax Honesty Day. So we've been doing this for 24 years. And what we do is we're trying to shine a light on all the hidden taxes that you pay every time you fuel up your car. And I say hidden taxes because when you fuel up your gas, you get the receipt, you see the total amount you're paying, you see the sales tax. That's the only type of tax that you see on the bill. And in some cities like Vancouver or Montreal, you could be paying 6 different types of taxes every time you fuel up. But most Canadians don't know that a big portion of the price, up to 38% here in Canada, is just taxes. So you have governments that are taking a huge chunk of money from us every time we fuel up. And it really should be the perfect time right now for every single government, provincial or federal, to give us some relief and do that by cutting that tax bill.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've got enough money, for crying out loud. And this is the good timing. We're coming before the May long weekend. It says, I said at the start of the show, I'm going to run down to Sandpoint, Idaho this weekend. And I looked ahead, and fuel down there in Sandpoint's $1.21 a liter American. So even with conversion, though, it's well under what I'm paying here in Alberta. And I don't think there's a single gas pump in Idaho, but they're paying far less for fuel than I am here in the heart of energy in Canada. So, I mean, it's all taxes.
And what's so crazy too, Cory, is that the tax bill in Alberta is the lowest that it is in Canada for 2 reasons. I mean, number one, there is no provincial sales tax in Alberta. But number two, you just have the Alberta government, and we have to give them some kudos here. They just scrapped the provincial fuel tax, saving Canadian drivers about 13 cents a liter. Now, where Albertans, like all Canadians, are really getting hammered is because of where I live. Politicians in Ottawa, the federal government, which continues to hammer Canadians with carbon tax hike after carbon tax hike. We've already seen the carbon tax increase 3 times during the pandemic. And Cory, we are seeing these gas prices absolutely surge, right? You saw in that video in Ottawa, over $2 a liter for gasoline, but the pain hasn't even hit us yet. By 2030, we're looking at about 96 cents a liter across Canada just in taxes because of Trudeau's carbon tax hikes.
But we'll all just get into electrical vehicles, right? So
Yeah. Well, yeah, good one. But here's the problem, right? I see this on Twitter. I shared that video that you just had that was taken by your reporter Matthew out in Ottawa. And, you know, some of the comments that I've seen on that and other videos that we're sharing is, well, you know, I'm not paying any tax, or I'm paying $0 of gasoline for my electric vehicle. Well, you know what? Not everyone has the type of money where you can just go out and buy a Tesla. And here's another thing that the Zoom class sometimes forgets is that many Canadians need to hop in their car on the way to work. Well, there's so many people right now who are struggling to afford the fuel that they need to get to work. And of course, also, I know we're talking about gasoline, but let's talk about natural gas, because Canadians get hammered there during the winter, and the carbon tax pushes up the cost for natural gas as well.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people don't understand. I think sometimes even if they aren't driving vehicles, you're going to pay for it. You pay for it one way or another. I like going out driving Uber occasionally. I still do that. It gets me out. It gets me around people. I make a few extra bucks. Not many now with the price of gas. But part of what Uber did was they've put a premium now on Uber fares to cover for the higher price of fuel. And that part of that higher price, because I don't get a break on the taxes when I fill up, is the tax. So just the message to people saying, well, I don't drive, it doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. No matter what you do, it's going to catch you.
Yeah. How do you think you got your food? Probably from a long haul truck, right? Look at their diesel bill. Look at their gas bill. It's influenced by all the different taxes that Canadians pay and the higher cost that they pay. I mean, in one way or another, whether they're adding on the tax to the price or whether it's just reduced supply, you're paying the higher grocery bill because of that. So it's not just people who have these so-called gas guzzlers, and nothing wrong with that. I love a good Dodge. But it impacts every single Canadian in every single aspect of life when you have governments that are completely tone deaf, that continue to raise tax after tax after tax after tax.
So, well, I'll throw you a loaded one here, though. I mean, if the government got rid of all those fuel taxes, wouldn't they go broke?
Yeah, good one. Is the Alberta government broke? Do you still have roads in Alberta? I haven't been in Alberta in quite some time. I'll actually probably be there this weekend. I'm sure the roads are doing just fine there, Cory, even though the Alberta government cut its fuel tax. But here's something. I was just on a national debt clock tour. I was on the road for 7 weeks driving coast to coast. And you know what, Cory? On average, we're paying 55 cents per liter of gas in taxes. That money, you know, politicians like to say it goes to the roads. Have you seen the quality of our roads in Canada? We're paying this huge tax bill, and we're not even getting the high quality service to match. You know, like I said, I went cross Canada driving a truck, and you know how many potholes we were running over? A lot.
Yeah, well, in Calgary, we spent all the money building bike tracks. So
right.
The vehicles have to be put off a little bit. But I mean, the roads are not perfect by a long shot. But that's one of the things. Is it's tax by deception. It's like another one of your favorites, bracket creep. It's another way. Again, the government is addicted to taxes, but it's even worse when you can't see the darn thing, when they slip it in on you, or they slip the increase in on you. So I appreciate your efforts, you know, and initiatives to get, as you said, the honesty of it. Let's see where it is, and maybe people have a different perspective if they understand what they're paying.
And Cory, there's one other very unfair tax, right? I told you about how there could be 6 different types of taxes if you're in a place like Vancouver or Montreal. But here's another unfair tax that all Canadians pay, regardless of where they live in Canada, and it's the gas tax on tax. And that happens because the federal government and some of the provinces, obviously not Alberta, calculate their sales tax after adding up all of the per liter fuel taxes. So you pay for the price of fuel, you pay for all these fuel taxes on top of that, but then you pay the sales tax on top of the fuel taxes on top of the price. That's called the tax on tax. It's extremely unfair. On average in Canada, it adds an extra 4.1 cents per liter of gasoline. So if politicians really want to provide relief, they could scrap that tax on tax. And one thing I'll say, Cory, just to kind of conclude my thought there, is that if politicians don't provide relief immediately at the pumps, it's a choice. They could do so right this second, put a ton of money back into taxpayers' pockets simply by cutting that big tax bill we're all paying at the pumps.
Well, and further to what you're saying, a convoluted tax system is an expensive tax system. I know my wife as a bookkeeper could speak to it. I mean, if you're in a commercial business of some sort, you will try to write off a number of taxes. But if you've got a whole bunch of different ones and taxes on taxes, these things take time to calculate, to sort out. It can cause errors. You're paying, I guess it helps Jane more for your bookkeeping and things like that. but it's another expense that gets passed down. Like, a simple straight tax, then if you're going to tax, it should be transparent and simple.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it leads me into my next point, which is the second carbon tax that is coming in late this year, just before Christmas. Yes, you heard that right. Not only are we paying Trudeau's carbon tax hikes all the way to 40 cents per liter by 2030, but the Trudeau government is bringing in a second carbon tax that is buried within fuel regulations. So you know what that means? You're going to need a whole bunch of paper pushers in the federal bureaucracy to administer these new fuel regulations. Now, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it's going to cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars just to pay for the bigger bureaucracy to administer the Trudeau government's fuel regulations, which is the second carbon tax. So you get dinged twice, right? You get dinged at the pumps, and then you get dinged on your tax bill because you have to pay for all these new bureaucrats in Ottawa to actually administer the regulatory quagmire.
Well, a lot of our bureaucrats are an important cottage industry for the country, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that brings me to another point there, Cory. You're just putting it on the tee for me. But, since 2017 in Ottawa, we've seen the federal bureaucracy increase by about 56,000 employees. Cory, 56,000 employees is the additional amount of bureaucrats in Ottawa since 2017. Now, I don't know about you, Cory, but I don't remember picking up the Ottawa Citizen or the Ottawa Sun and hearing about this big bureaucrat shortage in Ottawa before 2017. Do you remember that?
Oh, I don't remember people wailing in the streets. Oh, if only we had more bureaucrats, my life would be so much better right now. I imagine their wages haven't remained static throughout these periods either.
Oh, no, not even during the pandemic, Cory. They just couldn't help themselves. We know in the last few years, you have more than 312,000 bureaucrats that received at least one pay raise during the pandemic, while their neighbors in the private sector, of course, struggled with pay losses or pay cuts, job losses, or even business losses. And you know what really boils my blood, Cory, among many things, is that we just find out that about 89% of government executives received a bonus during the pandemic, even though departments met less than half of their performance objectives. Cory, what would Derek do to you if you couldn't meet half of your objectives? He wouldn't be giving you a bonus. He'd be kicking your butt on your way out the door.
Oh yeah, no, I can relate directly to it. I barely meet any of my objectives. He hasn't kicked me out, but I'm not getting any extra money for it. I get chronic, constant nagging.
But you know what? We're joking, but that is the total difference between the private sector and what we've seen in government, right? We've seen in government throughout this whole pandemic, just a bunch of, essentially, the bureaucrats are shielded behind the golden gates of government. And it's really unfortunate because you've seen private sector taxpayers get kicked in the teeth, whether it's from the lockdowns that have led to so many job losses or pay cuts, or whether it's these higher taxes that we're paying, like the higher carbon tax, right? Like the higher booze taxes, like the higher payroll taxes, like the sneaky backdoor income tax hike known as bracket creep in Alberta. It really seems like you just have these politicians and bureaucrats that keep reaching deeper and deeper and deeper into our pockets. But Cory, do we really see the level of services going up in Canada? I don't think so.
No, and I had some guests on earlier that you didn't catch, but they were from the Disability Workers Association, for example, in Alberta, but they're not government workers and they aren't unionized and they do a side service. They haven't had a raise in 7 years. And, this is an area where we just can't seem to get our priorities straight. We can pack those offices with people to shuffle ways on how to collect tax and administer it, but we can't seem to get people boots on the ground. We don't want to fund them.
Yeah, and you know what I've also seen that I think we have to talk about just in this broader context of inflation and gas taxes going up. There's actually a huge difference between what our governments are doing to us and what other governments are providing for their citizens, right? We can look around and we see a whole bunch of other jurisdictions that are actually providing their citizens with much needed relief. You have Spain and France that are reducing electricity taxes. You have South Korea that cut its gas tax by 20%. You have India that cut its gas taxes. You have a whole bunch of these Indian states and territories that cut gas taxes as well. You even have Italy that has cut taxes, including fuel taxes. You have American states that are cutting income and business taxes. You even have President Joe Biden who said he's considering gas tax relief. So you have all these countries, all these other jurisdictions that are providing their citizens with relief. And what does Ottawa provide us? A higher tax bill. Go figure.
Well, they're consistent, if nothing else. I appreciate you efforts you guys always do to keep shining a light on these things and, well, trying to keep the government as honest as we can. So you got your work cut out with it. Where can we find more information on the gas honesty report and your other activities, Franco?
Well, first, just please head over to taxpayer.com, click on the newsroom tab, and you'll find the report right there.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming in to check in with us again, Franco. It's always a good conversation. We're of like mind. I got to, I'll have other views where I can fight with people. I'm sure we'll find something we'll fight over.
One day, once we cut these taxes a little bit lower, hey?
Right on, you bet. Okay, well, I appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon. So yes, it was Franco Terrazzano, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. As some have noted, I have him on quite often, but as some have noted, it's always a good conversation. This guy knows his numbers, his facts, unlike me. So I appreciate Nico for quickly moving to correct all those graphics after I gave him the wrong information on what was supposed to be up there. He does a fantastic job. You can tell he's not union as well then, obviously. So yes, gas tax honesty. And, they just keep getting it to us one way or another. And when it comes to all kinds of taxes that are difficult, gas taxes are much like GST and so on that you just can't avoid them one way or another. They're going to get you. They raise your cost of everything. As Claudette was saying, yeah, Biden shut down oil and gas, and then look at the problems they're having with it, right? You got to get realistic with some of this stuff. All right, I'm going to run through a couple more news items before we wrap up, but I'll talk about our sponsor one more time as well, just to cap off the week, because they're helping pay our bills, as are you guys, which I greatly appreciate. And it is BitcoinWell.com. Again, those guys, because there's a lot to their site. It's a deep one, you really should have. When you get some time, get in there, check them out, BitcoinWell.com, because they have all those resources, all that information. They got online webinars, things they call Bitcoin Academy, to help teach you what Bitcoin's about. They're partnered with Athabasca University, so they put a good informative product together. Find out if Bitcoin is for you or not. I know some people have been talking about things. Bitcoin's gone down in value recently. Yeah, it has. It's like any investment goes up and down. I think typically you want to look at a longer game with things, but it's currencies have their ups and downs as well. Other investments have their ups and downs. These guys can help advise you on that. Make sure your money is safe. I don't think anybody would counsel you to put all of your money into one fund or anything like that. That's the great thing with these digital currencies. You aren't locked into one kind anymore. You can shop around. You can try different things. So check it out, bitcoinwell.com, and see if they've got a product that's right for you. They'll tell you. It's free consultations. And, take control of your money. As well as Nico's been putting up there. Yeah, visit the new website. We've updated it. We've upgraded it. There were a few hiccups, but for the most part, it seems to be ironed out, and it's much smoother now. We target our stories a lot more regionally, break them down a lot more. We outgrew our old system, basically. And it's at westernstandard.news. It's a shorter URL than it used to be. And, of course, it still has all the options for subscription and getting on there to be able to see all of our stories as they break, because we write them as they break. We are a news organization. We don't cut and paste. We got reporters on the ground. So let's see what else we had in the news there. Q7 ministers hold a war game depicting global leopard pox, whatever. Border reforms, there's another one. The third try on border reforms. That applies to me today. I guess I'll be crossing the border with any luck this evening going down into Idaho. Cabinet just can't seem to figure it out, though. So, this is the third time in 2 years they've introduced a bill for the Border Services Agency. You got to remember, they were striking, and they've had all sorts of other challenges going on down there. And that's an agency with a $1.6 billion budget, 11,500 employees, and they don't have an independent oversight board. They're kind of like a police force, but they don't have our government can't seem to figure out how to manage them. So yes, for the third time, they have brought in, or they're going to try and bring in a bill to strengthen things up. But of course, the person in charge of it is good old, and boy, he's really been coming up a lot lately. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, the one who has been known for lying and lying and lying again, lying a little more. He's the one who lied 11 times, saying that police forces asked them to enact the Emergencies Act. He's the one who lied, who said that arsons were from the truckers' convoy, were trying to burn buildings down. So I'm not going to put a lot of stock in his promise to fix things at the border services either. Just responding to a commenter there I saw was Brad asking if is it better to invest in Bitcoin when it's low? I imagine, and that's under the presumption it'll go up. One thing I don't want to do actually is offer financial advice. I'm not qualified for that. Your money's too important to listen to me on that. That's why I direct you to the people who do know what the hell they're talking about. And that's groups like Integrated Wealth Management, if you're looking at the broader things and things such as that, or Bitcoin Well, if you're looking at digital currencies, and they help guide you on when you want to get in or out. But as for exactly when or not, it would be very irresponsible of me to try and say anything along that line. Let's see. Bill C-20, an act establishing the Public Complaints and Review Commission would appoint an independent board to field public complaints. That's pretty boring stuff, isn't it? Oh, there's more stuff from Mendocino. These guys are painful. I mean, I guess that's one of the things with these bureaucrats. They do have to be paid a fair amount. I wouldn't be traumatized in committee from hard questions or anything like that. I'd be traumatized from boredom at some of these things as they got to go through. I mean, this stuff's important. This is how they slide stuff down, under the radar and give us bad policy at times and things. These long, convoluted, wordy bills, buried within them, you got a bunch of garbage, and we all pay an awful price for it. But yeah, here's the fear story of the week, of course. And here's the Quebec Health Ministry announcing there's 2 cases of monkeypox in Quebec. Whatever. It just never ends, right? They want to keep the fear going. I know people say, why are you even talking about? Well, because I like to point out there's 2. They got 20 suspected. Big deal. It doesn't spread that much, but it's making headlines because it's hideous looking. You see these bumps and pox all over people. But boy, they just love keeping us afraid, don't they? Well, we're going to report, if there's a mass monkeypox plague, we will report on it. But at this point, I will counsel people, don't lose sleep over it yet. Elon Musk, they're really after him, not surprisingly. They're scared, the crazed left, the woke left, the censorship left. They want to, they love Twitter. They loved how they could throttle conservative voices and how they could kind of corner that market where a lot of media member goes and those arrogant blue check buggers on there. Well, he had to denounce what he's saying anyways are untrue claims that he sexually harassed a flight attendant on a private jet in 2016. I don't know. I got no idea if it's true or not. I see no evidence that it is, though. I mean, the article quoted, this is from Reuters, right? So they put this whole thing and make international news out of it. An anonymous person who said she was a friend of the flight attendant. So a friend of a friend said Elon was naughty on a plane 7 years ago. And guess what? Let's make world news about it. Let's report the whole thing because they want to discredit Musk as much as they can. It's funny. The man who used to be their hero because he was bringing about electric cars, now they want to drag him down. So they report on crap like this. A friend of a friend said something happened, and we're going to make news. So he did respond to it. He says, I have a challenge to this liar. This is from Musk, who claims their friend saw me exposed. Describe one thing, anything at all, scars, tattoos, anything that isn't known by the public. He says she won't be able to because it never happened. Now, of course, it does make curiosity, and I don't want to see and find out, but God, he's got to have some weird scar or tattoo he's thinking of down there. I don't know. Who knows? But this is the world we're in, guys. You shake up the left, they're going to come after you and do what they can. As Claudette was saying, he couldn't care about these fools. Yeah, but he's big, but they can still keep chopping the legs out from under him. Don't underestimate when the left manages to get their forces together and with a common enemy, they can do some pretty nasty things. All right, let's see what else we got. Not much happening here in today. Next week, well, let me get out of here, guys. I'm heading to Idaho. Oh yeah, one other thing I missed, it was National Bee Day, just so you know. I'm supposed to get my bees. They've been delayed again. Global warming has made this spring so cold that my bees that were supposed to get here a week ago were delayed until Tuesday, and now they're delayed into mid-June. So I'm not going to be able to show all those videos of myself getting stung until sometime after mid-June. But it is National Bee Day among all those weird observances today. And on Tuesday, I'm going to have Chris Oldcorn on. He's, again, a Western Standard columnist, and we'll talk about a number of things he's been writing on. He's been doing some opinion stuff. He's going to be in person, actually, here in the studio. And I'm going to talk to Colin Krieger. He's the new leader of the Maverick Party. He was just elected to that position by the members a week ago. So we'll see where they're going on the federal front. So Wendy, Al, all the rest of you guys, Dash, you all have a good long weekend. I know I'm gonna, and I'll see you all on Tuesday morning.